Welcome, family, to another edition of Stranger Thinking Media, where we bring you the gospel of Yahusha HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, to address the problems of a modern world. So, stay tuned. We have an awesome show for you today.
Thank you, Rachel, for that introduction, and let's get on with the show. The Two Powers Dilemma. Topics covered: Polytheism, Zoroastrianism, Gnosticism, and Judaism versus the field. This ought to be a good show. Genesis 1, verse 26, and God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over everything that creepeth." Polytheism. So let's get into it. So polytheism is, we're all familiar with it because, through our secular education, we've come in contact with it on a regular basis. It seems like teaching Hebrew culture is a bad thing, but teaching Greek culture, well, that's the thing to teach because the Greeks were so superior to everybody else. Right. That's why the Greek alphabet is based off of the Hebrew alphabet. See, they call it, before there was ever an alphabet, there was an aleph-bet, right? So all of that Western culture, that comes from, the Hebrew language. And some people say, oh, it's the Phoenician. Well, Phoenician is simply Paleolithic Hebrew. Bottom line, that's the language of creation. That's the language that the Most High spoke to Adam in. So let's get that straight, right off the bat. I'm not trying to come off like harsh or anything, but you just got to think about it. Greek culture is just rammed down our throats, Odysseus and I don't know. I can't think of it. The Minotaur and Achilles, all that stuff. I'm just saying, it gets rammed down our throat, and I'm pretending that I don't know, but I read it a lot back in school. So let's look at the Greek pantheon of gods, and I'm not going to look at all of them. Like I said, we've been introduced to them, but you have Hades and Poseidon and Zeus, who overthrew Zeus's father, Cronus, king of the Titans, and became the chief deity in a new pantheon comprising mostly his siblings and children. In addition to controlling the weather, Zeus was noted for his chronic infidelity to his sister wife, Hera. Among the results of his weaknesses for comely mortal women was Helen of Troy. His Roman equivalent was Jupiter. Now, I found it interesting. You might think that the Greeks just made all this stuff up and it's just a story. But when you really look at it, there's a lot of a lot of similarities with other stories, or even stories of the Bible. Now, you might say, well, they don't mention Zeus in the Bible. Well, I might argue that point, but there's certain similarities. Like this Zeus guy, he's a powerful being that has a weakness for women and apparently goes around impregnating human women, creating what we call like little supermen, like Hercules or Hercules, right? And that's a familiar story because there were mighty men of renown created by the Watchers, the angels of the Most High Yahweh. And they came down and they did a rebellious act and impregnated human women. Sounds familiar. Sounds like we're actually kind of talking about the same story, only it's a different spin on it. There's stuff missing out of the Greek frame of thought. That's That's how the devil works. The serpent is very shrewd, very sly, right? He doesn't actually come out and say, hey, there's no God, because then he'd be doing himself in. He wants to be God. He doesn't actually call God an outright liar. He says, oh, no, you're misinterpreting it. What he meant was, and so he takes a perfectly clean glass of water and puts some arsenic in it to poison you. So what I'm saying is, he's subtle. He's not like in your, well, he can be in your face, but he's more, his power is in subtlety. So, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, but like I say, in Babylon, they use brick for stone. What is a brick? It's a man-made stone. So are these religions that don't adhere to the word of the Most High. I mean, they have an ancient understanding, a historical understanding, but they have themselves gone astray. So again, you see Zeus, and you can rattle off all the names of the watchers that came down. If you read the book of Enoch, and the story is similar, right? So I won't belabor that, but it's just one of those things that you should be able to see the similarities. It shouldn't be like, well, the Bible just copied off of these guys. No. Remember, they use brick for stone. That's the devil's subtlety. He's just taking what God says or the story and twisting it kind of a little more to his advantage. It's getting kind of secular. If you look at the Greek pantheon of gods, there's no rhyme or reason to these guys. They are driven about by their emotions. It's not like they're actually looking out for human beings. They're more like treating human beings like cattle. Like, they really don't care about us. They don't care what we do. That's the Greek frame of thinking. The Hebrew way of thinking is not that. So you can tell a similar story, but it's the point you're trying to make that counts. So, we won't go all into it, but what I'm going to try to do in this video is kind of put everybody back on track, because I've seen so much stuff on TV, about things like the Gnostics, Zoroastrianism, all these religious practices. And the Most High didn't give us religion. I mean, when you really get down to it, it's not about religion with him. He's saying he gave us instructions on how to live and how to be pure in his sight so that he could, for lack of a better term, work with us, because he cannot abide sin. And we became sinful, and so he had to start dealing with us a certain way, because he cannot coexist with sin. He just can't. That's not something that's possible. Just like when you turn a light switch on in the dark room, what happens? The darkness can't coexist with the light. As soon as you turn the light off, then the darkness swings back in. I mean, it's kind of that same principle. But let's giddy up here, because there's a lot to talk about. So, you see, Zeus kills his own dad. That's not a Bible, not something in the Ten Commandments. You shouldn't be doing that, right? So anyway, we'll continue with this. The twin brother of Artemis, Apollo, was among the most important of the gods. So he was the son of Zeus. He disseminated the will of his divine compatriots through various means, notably oracles. I guess this is their version of prophets. The oracle at Delphi was his mouthpiece. A 2001 study determined that the oracle was likely hallucinating due to ethylene gas rising from the rocks beneath the temple. Well, maybe not. But I'm not going to just blow it off and say, oh, yep, she was breathing in all this ethylene gas. No, she was in touch with demons, these demonic forces or angelic forces, fallen angelic forces. But be that as it may, Apollo, the reason I chose to talk about him also is because in the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ, or Yahushua HaMashiach, his true name, they mention Apollyon. And Apollyon, you guessed it, is Apollo. They're talking about demonic forces in the Bible and names it Apollyon, Apollo. But here you have the Greeks kind of worshiping Apollo. So here's a scriptural, the biblical take. Apollyon is a demonic force, or a very powerful, either a very powerful demonic force or an angelic force, or the newly created, maybe newly created Nephilim, because it says, as in the days of Noah, so shall the end days be, right? So what happened in the days of Noah? Angels came down and begot children with human women, and they became Nephilim and started to take over the earth. And we've done videos on, and it talks about essentially there's a scripture in Daniel that says, and they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. And that's talking about in the last days. Who is the they that's going to mingle their seed with us? Well, if we know the story of Noah, we know that the angels mingled their seed with human women, men, basically, right? And so it'll be like in the days of Noah. So I expect that to come back. And you say, oh, no, that's all in the past. The past is the past. Okay, let me ask you this. Why did Paul say women should have their heads covered when they pray? He said, because of the angels. Right? So then he goes on to say a husband is a woman's covering. So if a woman's married, she's covered. If you're not, and even then he stipulates women should have their heads covered because of the angels. So what does that actually mean? That's something you read. Your pastor probably read it and never explained what Paul was talking about. But Paul was referring to the watchers and what they did with human women. And so what he's saying is cover your head. Do not entice the angels. Remember Zeus. Zeus is just a fallen angel or demonic spirit, whatever, They're telling kind of the same story, only this Bible, or in this case, the book of Enoch, is telling you about watchers, what we call scripturally angels. But these angels wanted to be worshipped as gods, and so here you go, the Greeks and the Romans worshiping these fallen angels, giving them their names, like Zeus or Jupiter. But these are just fallen angelic forces that, what does it say? They wanted to be like the Most High. They're not trying to replace the Most High. They know they cannot do that. I mean, they're like a bunch of kids running around building a tree house, while the Most High, the Father, is at home, where the kids at, and they're out there doing, I'm going to be like king of the world in my tree house. Well, that's what the watcher angels are kind of like, spoiled brats going about trying to create their own thing. And so here you have them being named by various names by the Greeks and the Romans. And not just them, other people. They're all looking at the same story. It all comes out of Babylon. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But it all comes out of Babylon, the twisted story. Egypt and Babylon. In case you didn't know, Athens, in its earlier days, was called Osiria, named after the god of Egypt, Osiris. So who learned from who? The Greeks are learning from the Egyptians and the Babylonians, right? And there's a tie between Egypt and Babylon through Cush and Nimrod. So one comes out of the other. But the Most High, you know what he did at Babylon? They tried to build their own tower and then waterproof it so they couldn't flood them again. He already said he wasn't going to flood you again, but you didn't believe him. You didn't believe that. So it was no faith, right? They showed no faith. And they wanted to do things their way. So they knew they were going to be corrupt again. They just didn't want to get flooded again. Okay. So rather than comply, just look around you today. Just little things like the scripture says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And what do you see? Everybody and their grandmother, well, that's been done away with. No, it hasn't been done away with. If you're not doing it, you don't have the seal of the Most High if you're not doing it. I'm trying to tell you something. If you're not doing it, you're in rebellion, right? So it's almost like the Sabbath is a test commandment, but that's not the only one. It's little things in those scriptures that the Most High says stuff like, my people will know my name, right? My people will know my name. And then he says, then you got people who know his name, but you can't say the name. So it's funny, you can't say the name, but he said, I raised up Pharaoh just for this purpose, to show my power so that my name would be declared throughout all the earth. Declare is more than knowing. Declare means to speak the name of Father Yahweh, the creator of heaven and earth. His name is also an attribute. His covenant name is an attribute. It literally means the eternal, the infinite one, the one that just is. And he's the only one. So we can get back into that story of what angels are. Angel is really a job description. I mean, a man can be an angel. It just means messenger. So in some places, King James, he'll translate it as the living creatures. Well, creature denotes created, but they're referring to what we normally call angels, but they're not in messenger mode. So what do you call them? Living creatures. Well, what does this Hebrew say about them? See, the Hebrews calls them Elohim, right? Well, that's what you call God, Elohim. Yeah, but the Elohim, the creator, his name, Elohim is simply means the powerful ones, but the creator, he says, I'm the eternal powerful one. I am Yahweh Eloheinu, or Yahweh Elohim, right? He's saying, I am the eternal mighty one. These other little mighty ones I created. That's why they're called living, what? Creatures, created. So I'm trying to get that at home. People are just not getting that. They're coming up with all sorts of stuff. And I'm going to get into Zoroastrianism and Gnosticism. We already talked about Zoroastrianism in part 1, but I'm going to do a refresh. I'm not going to go all into it. Just watch the first video in this series if you really want to get into what Zoroastrianism is. And I started with that because it is a foundational belief system. It's the system of Babylon. And if you start observing the system of Zoroastrianism, you're going to find it's very similar to Christianity, especially the Christianity we call Roman Catholicism. It's very similar, like Sunday or the Saturnalia, the Brumalia, the December 25th, celebration, giving gifts and all that. That was all part of Zoroastrianism. So how does it end up being? It's not in the Bible, so it didn't come from there. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Where did it come from? And then I have people, you can tell they're not sealed. because they come up with, you'll hear the standard thing. Oh, well, Christmas is just a time for people to get together, family to get together. You know, okay, why don't you get together on Passover? Why don't you get together during the Feast of Tabernacles? And I can tell you the Feast of Tabernacles is a lot more fun than Christmas. I know people don't understand that. They think Christmas is the ultimate or something, but it's not. I mean, look at the things you're doing and ask. I mean, they're not even going to ask. They're so steeped in their, what is it? It's cognitive dissonance. If it's that good, you know, at least with cognitive dissonance, you know you're wrong, and you just, you know, if to, you want to keep it out your head because you know you'll have to do a huge paradigm shift, and you don't want to do it because it's just going to change your life in ways that you can't handle or you don't think you can handle. But then most people I see are just sticking to these old values that were handed down to them. And here's the crazy part, handed down to them by their enemies for the most part. And it's the hardest thing, especially in Americas. I mean, it's the hardest thing to get people to see, because once you drank the Kool-Aid, that's it. So nothing I say about Sabbath is going to register with you. And yet you cannot argue it. You literally can't. The Catholic Church doesn't even argue it. They say, yep, we changed the day. The Catholic Church did that. The Pope did that, right? And they kind of, they say, yeah, those Protestants, well, they still follow us, because if they weren't following us, the minute they left the church, they would have started observing the Sabbath again. But nope, they observe Sunday, showing that they're still under the authority of the Catholic Church. They will tell you this. You can't make this stuff up. People are just, if you don't see it, you just don't see it. And what I don't do anymore is I don't force people to see it, because I know I've seen this in my lifetime. It's not about the size of, say, a church. I've seen churches grow and expand, and what I see every time a church gets big, it's like the initial founding group, they usually have a lot of faith. Those are the faithful ones. But then it starts to expand, and then people join in, and then it gets diluted. Now, you know, I'll make up a number. By the time that church is now 1 million strong, it's useless. It was more powerful when it was just 100. Because that first 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, those were the prayer warriors. That's the ones that had the spirit. That's the ones, that, you know, that the Most High was working through. And then, you know, as Satan does, he comes in and says, I got to put an end to this. So he starts planting his tares in the middle of those organizations. I've seen it. I know what happens. So it's not, if you're still in one of these denominational churches, I'm not saying you don't belong, you don't have God's spirit. I'm not telling you that. And it could be just lack of knowledge. It could be pure ignorance. You don't know. I mean, a lot of people I've been there. I didn't know. So, but the difference is when I start learning, I start reading, and then I start putting two and two together, and then I'm like, no, it doesn't make sense what they're doing. Where did that come from? The minute it don't make sense to me, I go, no, not me, not doing that, not doing that. So anyway, I got off on my tangent. But I want to focus on Apollo here, because Apollo is actually mentioned in the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ, and he's called the Destroyer. He's also called Abaddon, the Destroyer. That's the Hebrew term for it, right? So I find it interesting that everybody knows about this Destroyer guy, Apollo, the one to be feared. Wow. So he comes back. What's the term? He manifests. Apollo. That's the Greek term for him. The scriptures call him Abaddon, and he is the destroyer. Well, we can kind of figure out who that is. You know, he's the destroyer son of Zeus. You have other stories like the destroyer son of Odin, right? That would be Thor, right? But Thor gets a pass today because he's a Marvel comic hero, right? Yeah. Just demons and more demons, I'm telling you. Anyway, so I'm trying to get this straight. So Apollo is actually mentioned in the scriptures. He's known as the destroyer, and he comes back in the last day to reset up essentially the kingdom of his I don't know if you want to say forefather, of his compadres, his companions. So the question is, does he possess, does the spirit of Apollo possess the Antichrist? Antichrist. Because you know it's going to be one guy who's going to be leading this show. It's not that there's more than one Antichrist. Anti just means against Christ or against, that's Greek, but in the Hebrew it's Hamashiach, the Messiah, the anointed, right? So this guy directly opposes the kingdom of Hamashiach returning to earth. And so he's known as the destroyer. So let's move on. This is taking longer than I thought. I always say that though, but I just want to make some things clear. So we're talking this kind of the same guys. The Greeks are talking about the same guys. The Hebrews are talking about the same guys. Only in the Hebrews call them essentially angels, fallen angels, whereas the Greeks call them gods. Okay, hopefully that sunk in a little bit. Bottom line, angels are Elohim, but they're created Elohim. Okay, let's also look at this one. Okay, Dionysus was also a son of Zeus, but born to a mortal mother. Here we go back with that theme. Fallen angels, or Elohim, getting with human women and producing, pseudo gods, right? Or Nephilim. So it says, when Zeus accidentally killed Dionysus' mother, he sewed the young Dionysus into his thigh, and when the young god emerged, passed him to the care of the Maenads. Maenads. The cult of Dionysus revolved around intoxication, sex, and savage ritual sacrifice. He was often symbolized by a bull due to his a bull due to his association with the sacrificial animal. Elements of his character are seen in the Roman god of wine, Bacchus. Yeah, the party god, Bacchus. But he's often symbolized as a bull. Well, where does that come from? That wasn't it Moloch, always depicted as a bull? Remember Christ was on the cross and he looked down, and there was a prophetic utterance from King David in the Psalms. He says, my tongue cleaveth unto my mouth. I am poured out like a drink or a water, whatever. I am surrounded round about by strong bulls of Bashan. So what King David was seeing, he was having not a premonition, but he was seeing into the future. He was seeing through the eyes of Messiah, who is his offspring, right? So he's seeing through the eyes of Messiah and the pain and the suffering, the dry mouth because he's dehydrated. His tongue's cleaving to his mouth. He's poured out like a drink offering, like he's just wasted, like no strength. He's suffering, and he looks out, and he doesn't see people. He sees strong bulls of Bashan. These bulls, these are demons. He can see into the demon world, and they're having a party. They're just in revelry that we got him. We nailed him to the cross. We did in the Son of God. The strong bulls of Bashan, and Bashan is the place. Yeah, remember King Og, and he was the last of the Rephaim kings. Giants. Yeah. Strong bulls of Bashan. Bulls from Bashan. The Nephilim. He was looking at the, the disembodied Nephilim. They looked like, in the spirit, looked like bulls. That's deep. I bet you never heard that one before. But anyway, let's continue. So, all these elements that are actually in Scripture, talking about, let's just say it the way it is. The Greeks called the fallen angels of the Bible gods. That's all this is. And yes, there's more than one God. Yes, there's more than two gods. Well, what does it mean, God? The English language is messing you up. There's more than one Elohim. Okay? Elohim just means mighty ones or powerful ones. That's what it means. But at the top of the food chain well, be careful. I don't want to give it away. At the top of the food chain is Yahweh Elohim, the eternal Elohim, or the eternal mighty one, the creator of everything, right? So sometimes it gets painful to watch because I was watching TV and I'm going to get into it when we get to the Gnostics, but oh my goodness, they are talking, it's just pure. I'm not trying to offend people, but these people have taken the scriptures and I could see where they erred. They were very much affected by Greek culture. And so what ends up happening with them, and Zoroastrianism was rampant in the Roman Empire. My point is, if that's how you were raised under these pagan circumstances, and then here comes Paul or the apostles and they're preaching Christ, you might start mixing some of your core old beliefs with some of your core new beliefs, right? And so you end up with something like Gnosticism. I'm just saying, and I could see where they went off on a tangent. I could see why they went off on a tangent, what caused, there's certain scriptures that, like when they saw Elohim, they understood immediately, oh, that's plural. That means there's more than one God. That's yes. However, then they take it to another level that is, you can't get that. You're being influenced by something else once you go to where they're going with it. So let's get into it. We'll talk about it. So Dionysus, a half god. Sounds like Hercules, right? Genesis 11, verse 3. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and slime for mortar. I like mentioning that because I want you to understand the premise of Babylon is not to do away with religion. It is not to do away with religion. It is simply created its counter religion, if you will, or turned the words of Yah inside out to benefit them using brick for stone. And they use brick for stone and slime for mortar to create a tower in Babel, right, to reach to heaven. Well, they're being motivated by these fallen angels and these demonic spirits. That's why they're doing it. Who's putting it in Nimrod's head to do this stuff? Who was Nimrod possessed by? And I can go on all day about what I think, but we're going to jump over here to Zoroastrianism. Like I said, we did a whole video on that one. So I'm going to kind of breeze through this, but you're going to see the same pattern. It seems like everybody gets it. Yeah, there's more than one God. Yes, there is. And I don't know if I can use that term God anymore because that's the term that's messing the Western world up. Use the Hebrew term. It means more because that's what it was written in. That's who it was written to, the Hebrews. So understand what they understood, right? Let us, the Elohim, go down and create man in our image, right? So it's the us thing. It's plural, but there's more to it. That us is not the angels. Although, people have gone that direction too. Oh, so Yah went down with his angels, so that's who the us is. And then they also compare it to what he said at the Tower of Babel. Let us go down and confound their language. And so, so you could take that. I can almost forgive that tact, except I know better. And that's not for this video, but we'll get into that in another video at some point. Or you can read my book, God Through the Eyes of the Hebrews. It's out. It's on Amazon, and it explains a lot of the stuff in detail. There's more to talk about, and I'm probably going to do another book to close that topic out. Because if you don't get the foundation right, nothing really makes sense. You're blown about by every wind of doctrine. And I looked at turned on YouTube, and all this craziness was popping up, and I was like, if I didn't know, I wouldn't know who's telling me the truth in that. Stick to the scriptures. I'm not saying you can't do external studies, but your foundation has to be sure. If you don't understand who Yahweh is, if you're still using the term God, you're in confusion, because just using that term completely blocks out the understanding of who and what we're dealing with. Use the Hebrew terms and then look at what all those terms mean. So, a lot of people don't know the difference between a demon and an angel, a fallen angel. There's a big difference. But you have to stick with the scriptures, and then you can't go off on a tangent. You might think I'm going on. No, I'm not going on. I understand. I get it. I see darkly, like Paul said, we see darkly. I mean, I can't, does God have hands? Well, it kind of says he does, but we're talking about spiritual entities. Is God a guy? Well, it always talks about him like he's a guy, but we're talking about spiritual entities. Jesus said, or was it Paul? We shall be like in the resurrection, we shall be like the angels, neither marrying nor giving in marriage, which leads me to believe there's no need to reproduce, because what are you at that point? Eternal. You have eternal life. There's no need to reproduce. So the question is, really, do spirit beings actually have gender? They have roles, but is it, we're human and we see things in the physical realm. So, yep, God must have hands. He says he has hands, but when he says he has hands, does it mean 4 or 5? Five fingers, and it doesn't mean kind of something else, an extension of his spirit that goes forth and does things. Oh, like the word? The word goes forth. That's kind of what his hand is. I'm just trying to tell you, we do not understand the spirit world. We can understand kind of how it works, but what the essence of these beings actually are, we don't have a clue. We can't even imagine. We see darkly. We see the shadows on the wall, okay? That's all we see, the little shadows on the wall of something bigger going off behind us in the background with the sun shining on it. So we see shadows. But the shadows aren't the real, right? Shadows are just the silhouettes of something real. We are like the silhouettes of something real. So, anyway. So getting back to Zoroastrianism, Ahura Mazda and Angramanyu. Oh boy. How should I break? I'll put it like this. Ahura Mazda. Did I spell Mazda wrong? I apologize. But anyway, Mazda. Yeah, the car company Mazda is named after Ahura Mazda. That's the good God. And Angramanyu, think angry man. He's the bad guy. So the king of the gods, Ahura Mazda, there I spell it right there, also known as Ormuzd, created all things. He first created sky, then water, earth, wind, and fire. Do you remember? You know what I'm talking about. It just came to my head as I saw that. He created vegetation, animals, human beings, and fire after he had fashioned the sky, water, and earth, and covered earth with plants and flowers. He made the primordial bull. That's a bull again. Why is everybody? It's always about a bull. And the name of the bull was Gavevadata. Wow. Who was so beautiful, it attracted the attention of Angra Mainyu. So a lot of Zoroastrian beliefs still propagate in that part of the world, say in Persia or Iran and India. And I think the bull thing, like in India, you cannot hurt a bull because bulls are, I think that's a different premise. But anyway, bulls are supposed to be the reincarnated family members or something. I'm not sure. But bulls just seem to always pop up in here somewhere. So anyway, Angela Manu was attracted to the beauty of this bull. Attracted his attention. Who killed it? Well, yep, that's what you do when you're attracted to something. You kill it, right? So that tells you Angela Manu has anger issues. Anger issues. Get it? Anyway, Ahura Mazda brought the body of the androgynous. Oh, androgynous means sexless bull to the moon, where it was purified, and from its purified seed came all other animals. Ahura Mazda then made the first human. First human was Geomortan, who was also killed by Angela Manu. Kind of almost like a Cain and Abel thing going on here. I can see similarities in all of this stuff. And so, like I said, you'll have people say, see, the Bible's lying. It stole this information from Egypt. It stole this information. No, there's pure water and then there's the dirty water. I can see where the Ashatan has come in and twisted things and said, see, this is how it really happened. That other stuff is a lie. So anyway, you can kind of see the handwriting on the wall, but don't use that as an excuse. What you should say is, wow, it seems like everybody's seeing kind of the same thing. It probably happened, but which version is more correct? That's maybe a better question. So don't be saying the scriptures copied or stole, because that Hebrew language is a lot older than a lot of other languages. And I heard somebody talking about, they stole. What do they say? Israel is basically Isis, Ra, and Elohim. And I'm like, that's the dumbest crap I ever heard. It really is, because when you understand the Hebrew language and what each letter stands for, it literally means nothing of the sort. In fact, it's not really Israel, really. Probably Yasharel, which means the upright of Elohim. So what I'm saying is, people will, if you don't know better, if somebody could come along and say, no, that's Egyptian. Israel means Isis, Ra, and El. I'm like, really? And there's people believing that, and I feel sorry for them. Apparently, my videos don't get enough traction. I would love for my stuff to get out there. And I'm not the type who, I'm not going to argue with people. What I do is, and I'm going to, I got to, like I said, I'm working on another book. There's a formula to all of this. And once you understand the formula, everything comes together. And I'm trying to get you to that formula. And it seems like something is interfering with it, not allowing me. It's not getting out the way it should get out. And then when it does get out, of course, and you expect it, there's going to be people who are grounded and rooted into these religions of this world who will die for their denomination, whatever. They'll never give it up. They're just locked in like that. And I feel sorry for people like that, because I know a lot of church history. So Yeah, there's a lot of church people going to be in for a big surprise. Yeah, learn church history and see what it is you really believe. Not so much what somebody brainwashed you with, but what does the book say? And be careful, pray about it. What does it say? And try to learn Hebrew because therein lies the key. Without an accurate understanding of Hebrew, and I'm not saying you have to be an expert, but it would help, I'm telling you. And the fact that the people, your shepherds, your pastors, don't know, they can only regurgitate what they've been taught. But there's a scripture that says, our fathers have inherited lies. There's a reason. Was it Jeremiah who said that? Our fathers have inherited lies. Because there's going to come a moment. It even says that that the Most High says He will once again reveal His name to His Kodashim, to His people, which implies that somehow, some way, everybody forgot His name. So He's basically saying, "I'm going to reteach you my name," and that's how I know we're in the last days, because here I am trying to tell people the Creator of heaven and earth has a name, and it's not God. Okay, He has a name, and it's not God. He has a name, and it doesn't start with the letter J, because there was no letter J. So, I mean, how simple can it be? You know, and I'm not trying to insult people, because what I try to do, and there are some people who are hardcore. They're like, basically, forget those people, man. And in their mind, they're going to hell or whatever. And I look at it a little differently. I look at it more like, where did I come from? You can't hate that which you once were. That's the way I look at it. Because if I can get to this point, knowing where I came from, I mean, I grew up Roman Catholic. I'm going to tell you right now. And I was proud of it. And I started reading the Bible. It just kind of, I couldn't justify certain things, And so I started reading more and more. And the more I read, let me step out of this thing. Let me step back and see what it is. Sometimes you have to step away. Like when you're right up on something, you can't really tell what it is. But when you back up a few paces, then you go, oh, that's a bull. You know what I'm saying? So you can sometimes you just have to step back to see clearly what it is you're dealing with. All right. So I'm not going to belabor this, but if you can just follow the steps, it will self-explain everything, the scriptures. Now, there's more than 66, 66 books of the Bible. No, there's more than 66 books. But then there are also crazy books out there. And we're going to get into that. I'm not picking on the Gnostics, but they had their stuff buried under a library in Egypt for safekeeping, and they dug them up. And that was done in 1945, I believe. And that's how we know so much about what Gnostics believe, because we found their writings, and there's some fascinating stuff in there. And I'm like, yeah, no. All right, that's no. Anyway, let's finish off with the Zoroastrianism. Ahura Mazda had given him free will. Oh, yes, we got to start over. From his purified seed came the first mortal couple. So, remember the Angramanya had killed that first guy, but from his purified seed came the first mortal couple, Masha and Mashyanag. Well, Adam and Eve, but they're saying there was a man before Adam. Wonder why they say that. Who lived in bliss until corrupted by Angela Manyu's lies. Sounds like the serpent. See, everybody's kind of telling the same story, but they add a little here, take away a little there, and then it gets a little confused. Oh yeah, Babylon, confusion. They then lost paradise. Oh, got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. But the naysayers will tell you, of course, that this story proves the Bible is a copycat. No, it's not. Everybody got the same. It comes from the same source. Everybody got the message. But if you look at Abraham, the reason God or Yahweh chose him is because he was faithful to the message. He was faithful. So if you want to see the truth, you want to come through the line of Abraham. They were given the oracles. Everybody else made up their own oracles. Everybody else used brick for stone. Abraham used actual stone. Okay, they then lost paradise, but their descendants inherited the gift Ahura Mazda had given them of free will. Of course, everybody's got free will. Do not eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They had free will, and they chose to what? Rebel against the word and to be disobedient. And I laugh when people say, well, Adam messed up. If it was me, I wouldn't have done it. I would have listened. God, Yah says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, and you don't. So shut up. For all you know, the only sin Adam and Eve ever, the only sin they ever did was that with the fruit. They may not have sinned again. They might have been perfect after that, but guess what? It's too late. Disobedience brings death. That's why you can walk around saying the law is done away with. No, it's not. That's why you know what? The people saying the law is done away with, those are the same people looking at their pastors, getting busted, hanging out with rappers of ill repute. You know what I'm saying? Those are if you do away with the law, then you have mayhem. Oh, wait a minute. Let's look around us. I remember growing up, and I remember walking a quarter of a mile to school in the first grade. Now, how many parents today would feel comfortable enough to allow their little first grader to walk a quarter of a mile to school? Yeah, things are getting pretty wicked. Yeah. And I'm old enough to remember when things were safe. I remember when people didn't have to pay for water. You know, you didn't have to buy water in a bottle. If you were outside and you were thirsty, you didn't even have to go in your house because there was a faucet right outside your house and you can get, guess what? Fresh, clean water. You can't do that now. I don't know what's coming out that faucet, but I wouldn't drink it. But times are changing. And don't say every generation says that about the generation that follows. No, they do, but no. This is a different animal. This is a created animal. This animal was created recently. My generation actually is not that much different than my mother and father's generation. They might have looked at us and they might have looked at us and said, yeah, you guys are a little wilder than us, but hey, it's not much different. In fact, I remember my mother saying to me, among other things, she was a very wise woman. She said, she looked at us and she said she could see the future. She looked at her grandkids and said she can't see a future. Not that they don't have one, it's just that her sight could only go that far. It's almost like the darkness kicks in or something that just she couldn't see beyond that. And I understand what she's saying because I look at my kids and I fear for what they're going to have to deal with. And not to mention what their kids are going to have to deal with. I mean, there's a lot of craziness going on right now. A lot of wickedness in high places, planning and scheming all the time. And yet we're getting blinder and blinder to it. Not good. That's a bad combination. So anyway, Ahura Mazda had given them free will so they could choose for themselves whether to follow good or embrace evil. Ahura Mazda stood for all that was ennobling and righteous, and encouraged people to be the best version of themselves. You know, I hear that a lot lately. Oh, be the best version of yourself. Well, no. Be, I mean, if be the best version of yourself, if you're a psychopath, what are you saying? Be the best psychopath that you can be? There's a lot of people acting that way. No, there's more than that. That's why you were given laws that, oh, by the way, the Messiah followed every one of them to the T. In fact, he followed them so well, they were looking at him like, you just healed somebody on the Sabbath. Yeah, because it's good to do good on the Sabbath. You know, I didn't tell you to stop breathing on the Sabbath, but your focus is on the Most High and his ways and his teachings and doing the things that he would do. You know, it's the other extreme. I don't want to go to the other extreme. And so when people hear the term law, they think, Pharisee. No. Remember the Messiah? He fulfilled all righteousness. Oh, that's what it meant. He fulfilled the law. Yeah. Doesn't mean he did away with it. He said, I have not come to do away with the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them. What does that mean? So he didn't come to do away with them. So what does it mean to fulfill them? To fulfill prophecy and to fulfill the requirements of the law. You should too. Follow me in this endeavor. That's what he's saying to you. Anyways. Ahura Mazda and Angaramanyu. It just sounds funny. As soon as I heard Mazda, I thought, is that where the car company? Yeah, that's where the car company comes from. That's where they get their name. And they got like that symbol, like two wings or something. I don't know. So the spirit of discord, Angaramanyu, also known as Ahriman. Oh, sounds like Saruman out of Lord of the Rings, right? Ahriman led the legions of dark spirits known as devas. His sole purpose was to disrupt the order established by Ahura Mazda, and he would destroy whatever beauty Ahura Mazda had created. Ahura, you know what I'm thinking? Ahura, is that the same name as that beautiful sister on Star Trek? Remember, was it Ahura? I don't know. Anyway, maybe that's where her name comes from, Ahura Mazda, right? As in the cases cited above, his origin in early Iranian religion is never given, but later work by the Orientalist Martin Haug describes him as the destructive emanations from Ahura Mazda's creative act. So basically, he's like the carbon emissions of your turbocharged Lamborghini. He's the carbon. You know, stuff you don't want. That's a byproduct. I guess. Anyway. So anyway, they're saying this in this religion, this belief system. They're two equal and opposite gods, yin and yang. You know, and this is an old story. When we get to Judaism, you're going to see some interesting things. These are old debates. And because, you know, rabbinic Judaism, they have grappled with that very question, you know. Yeah. That pluralism, you know, Elohim is a uniplural noun. It's plural. What does it mean? So they grappled with it, and they're surrounded by people who took the ball and ran with it. So now they're like surrounded by, you know, polytheists and dualists, and you know. So at the end of this, we're going to see what their take was on it, but it was fascinating. Let's see. In the same way that other deities became emanations, so was Angaramanyu. Only the spirit was the excess dross of creation, which became sentient. Wow. And malevolent toward the creation. In the later religious belief system of Zoroastrianism, Angulamanu and Ahura Mazda are twin brothers born of the god Akarana Zorban, infinite time. See, infinite. There goes that Yahweh vibe. Okay, so what we're starting to lean back to here is that when we talk about the infinite, what's his name? Akarana Zorban, or the infinite time guy. Doesn't that sound like the I am? It sounds like everybody's kind of talking the same thing with a twist. They have a different twist to it. And there's these other gods that come from other gods. Well, yeah, the infinite time God would be God, right? Because he's infinite. The other ones had a finite, start point. They started at some point. But the infinite ones don't have a start point or an end point. Which, really, if you think about it, that's what really defines God, isn't it? He just is. Because if he wasn't just is, where did he come from? Well, then, like here in this story, there's a bigger God. And then it never ends. There's always some bigger God or older God. It's just never going to end. Pick one. Stop with one, right? Okay. This is tough. This is tough. We're going to get through this. Psalm 110. And the Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand till I make thine enemies thy footstool. Yeah, there's a lot more of that statement than meets the eye. You guys are going to, what does this say? You guys, I've read it. I remember back in the day reading it quite often. I love reading the Psalms. I would run into this quite often. But what does it mean? The Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. The way I used to always take it, right, was, okay, God said unto Jesus, sit at my right hand until I make thy enemies thy footstool. It's prophetic, right? So the question is, what does the Hebrew say? Does, if I remember correctly, and even the Messiah brings it back up. Why does David call him Lord? Why does the older call the younger? You follow what I'm saying? Because Yahusha, Jesus, the one you like to call Jesus, Yahusha is a descendant of David. So why is David referring to him as Lord? And that was brought up in the New Testament, right? So the Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand. So there are two Lords. See, we're going to get to it. We're going to get to this. I'm going to put it in book form because these videos can only go so far, but I'm priming you. The Lord said unto my Lord. Two Lords, okay? Two. Let's keep that thought. Two would be plural, wouldn't it? Two is plural. Two would fulfill Alim. Oh, wait a minute. Two. Maybe that's why he created man, male, and female. Two. But Eve was not created really separately. She came out of Adam. Adam was from the dust. Well, why didn't he create Eve from the dust? Why did he create Eve out of his very marrow, with his very DNA? And then Adam looks at her and goes, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Let's get married. For this reason shall a man leave his mother and father, that he shall find a wife, and two shall become one. All right, let's giddy up. Let's see what else we can trip over. It's always interesting. Oh, now we get into Gnosticism. That's the fun one. Are you ready? Yeah, we used to say that back in the day, when rap first came out. Are you ready? Okay. Now this is the trippy one because Gnostics would consider themselves Christian, right? So we're gonna look at the main character, one of the main characters. Actually, in their way of thinking, Jesus is the main character, right? But there's this thing called a demiurge. And here's where they also look at the word Elohim and understand it means plural, that it's two mighty ones, or at least two mighty ones. They get it. But how do they rationalize it, right? It seems like everybody kind of gets that part. But, you have the Roman Christians say it's a trinity. Okay. Now you have the Gnostic Christians saying it's Jesus and the demiurge. Well, it turns out the demiurge, and this is what made me start actually looking into it. I saw a video. It was titled something on the others. Yahweh's the devil, right? I was like, what? And I was like, what? Where'd they get that from? When I started looking into it, I said, oh, I see what they're saying. So essentially, this demiurge, well, let's read it. The demiurge, or Greek demiurgos, means craftsman, is the being who created the world in Gnosticism. Okay, wait for it. The Gnostics identified him with the God of the Old Testament. Well, who would that be? Well, is the one they called Yahweh. Okay? The Gnostic scriptures portray him as ignorant, malicious, and utterly inferior to the true God who sent Christ to earth to save humankind from the demiurge's evil world. Okay, this is freaking me out. This is right. So let me get this straight. Here's the problem with this. Number one, go back to the Hebrew. Who did Abraham pray to? Or unless you're saying Abraham was a ding dong. He didn't know. He was praying to the demiurge. Who was Moses praying to? They all praying to this Yahweh. Who was King David and King Solomon praying to? Yahweh, right? And what the Gnostics, they read the Old Testament and say, that's a mean God, and he's obviously twisted and ignorant and malicious and utterly inferior to the true God. There must be a real God, and that was the fake God. So let me get this straight. Abraham was worshiping the fake God. Moses was worshiping the fake God. That just blew my mind when I read that, because they were worshiping Yahweh, right? Yahweh means the eternal, the I am. I just am. I was, I am, I will be, the eternal one. So here's the Gnostics trying to merge these things into another story that they had from probably Zoroastrianism, and trying to merge the two, and they come out with this. So, and I'm not down on them. I mean, I could see the what's the term? I could see them attempting to make sense of all of this. However, it goes off on a rail. And I'm trying to tell you, if there's a nice little, I'm telling you, once you understand the foundational stuff, everything literally falls in place. There's no confusion at that point. And then every scripture you read from that point on, when you look back and read it from that perspective, the correct perspective, it all makes sense. And you just go, wow, how did I believe all that other stuff? You know what I'm saying? If you believe all this other stuff, you'll never figure out where this whole thing is going. You're still believing in, if you're Gnostic, you're believing in the Yahweh's the demiurge, and there's a good God and Christ. So the demiurge that created all things, his name is Yahweh. What? So basically you're saying Yahweh is the devil. I just understand. Well, they'll grab scriptures where, Yahweh says that he brings good and evil. Well, yes, he does, because he gives everybody free will, and he can see some wicked thing happening, and he's got a choice. He can stop it or let it go. So what he's telling you, here's Torah, here are these laws. If you follow these laws, you'll stay on the right side of the interstate. You'll be on the right side of the double yellow line. If you fail to keep these laws, you start crossing over the double yellow line into oncoming traffic. He's trying to help you. But you seem to think that if he's giving me rules, then he must not love me. And so when I cross the double yellow line and get in a head-on collision, it's his fault. I mean, no, we told you to stay on that side of the line. So how's it his fault that you did some stupidness? Because you had free will, right? Yeah, I've done stupidness. Yeah, so I get it. I am not by any stretch of the imagination saying I'm above stuff. I'm just saying I recognize and I don't try to deny the truth. The truth is there are laws. Obey the laws and you have a better, although everything's so screwed up in the world, even obeying the laws, let's put it this way, obeying the laws will keep you safe to a degree, but there's so much wickedness that it's still going to touch you. So in the time of the children of Israel, and remember, this was it wasn't the very beginning, but it was the beginning of nations forming, basically. The nation that would follow these laws would become so organized, so unified, so tight, so faithful, so confident, not so much in themselves, but in their beliefs, that like a guy like Moses could say, go up, Yah will deliver them into your hands. And this is not a warrior nation at the time. They were sheep farmers, and they went up. And pretty much when Moses said, Yah has delivered this nation into your hand, he sure as heck did. So anyway, I'm saying the whole duty of man, the whole duty of man is to obey God and keep his commandments. That's what the great king said. He figured it out. He said, yeah, I've done it all. And the end of the matter is obey God, keep his commandments, because you definitely are not going to live forever. Not on this earth anyway, not in your present body. And if you want to get a good body, a new body, an immortal life, you obey those commandments. He's telling you. Anyways, so we talked about the demiurge. Let's continue. You're going to see what I mean by this Gnostic twist. Yeah. The demiurge is given many names in the Gnostic scriptures. We'll see what that's all about. And there's a couple names in here. Well, let's read it because, like I say, it gets really interesting. Okay, the demiurge is given many names in the Gnostic scriptures, but the three most common ones are Yaldabaoth, which almost sounds like Sebaoth. Remember, it's Yahweh Sebaoth. That's Yahweh in his warrior mode. That's what that seems like. Also spelled Yaldabaoth. And then Samael. Well, that was one of the angels in the book of Enoch. And Saklas. Saklas comes from the Aramaic word for fool. And Samael is Aramaic for blind god. Interesting. Or god of the blind. The meaning of Yaldabaoth is uncertain. The Gnostic text on the origin of the world fancifully translates it as youth. Move over there. Okay. But no word or string of words that sounds like Yal the Beath. What I'm looking at is Yah Sabaoth. Yeah. Yah Sabaoth. Yahweh Sabaoth. Essentially the eternal, the Lord of hosts. The God, essentially the God in his warrior mode. Meant that in any ancient Mediterranean language, Yaldabaoth is somewhat close to child of chaos. In Aramaic, but that's still a stretch, as is the intuitively plausible suggestion that it could be a condensed form of Yahweh. Now there it is, or Yahweh, Lord of Sabbaths. Yeah, there is an actual term. When they say Lord of Hosts, they say Yahweh Sabaoth or Yah Sabaoth. That makes sense. I get that. Now, here's the Gnostics. And what they're doing is kind of trying to piece together, okay, this new Christian thing. We believe in this Jesus guy. He healed sick people. He gave sight to the blind. We believe this. You see what I'm saying? But now we got to make it make sense with what we've been taught all our lives. So make it make sense. Everybody wants it to make sense, right? Okay. Yeah, this is about to become the longest video I've done to date. I feel it. Let's see. In the Gnostic creation myth, heaven, which the Gnostics call the pleroma, wholeness, was all that existed until a divine entity named Sophia. What the heck? Sophia tried to conceive on her own. So Sophia reminds me of the Word, because all things were made through the Word and by the Word. So Sophia tried to conceive on her own without the involvement of her heavenly partner or the consent of God. Sophia gave birth to a son. That was the product of the rebellious and profane desires that had arisen within her. Interesting. And let's keep going. This just gets deeper and deeper. These Gnostics, wow. And I'm not saying, hey, if you're into this, fine. I'm not gonna knock you for it, but I'm gonna keep trying to guide people in a certain direction. And I'm not forcing. Everybody's got free will. I just want the information to be there. And if it makes sense, if it jives with you, it jives with you. If it doesn't, you keep on your merry way. We can agree to disagree. I'm fine with that. This son of hers was the demiurge. Oh my goodness. So Sophia gave birth to the demiurge, to Yahweh. Now think about the problem with that. So here, the Gnostics have determined, they're saying Yahweh, but it's Yahweh, right? That Sophia gave birth to the eternal. Well, that's counterintuitive. The eternal doesn't have beginning of days or end of days. He just is. So how can Sophia give birth to the one that just is? See? But I could see them scratching at the question. There's got to be more than one. So it must have been like this, because we know there's Jesus, and Jesus had a father, but he wasn't that mean guy in the Old Testament. Everybody's trying to scratch. Wow. The devil is just crafty. He's got everybody just completely confused. Just completely. Wow. Okay, so this son of Sophia was the demiurge, meaning, according to them, Yahweh. Right? The Gnostic text reality of the rulers describes him as an androgynous being, essentially a sexless being, neither male nor female, being an arrogant beast, now starting to sound like the devil, that resembled an aborted fetus in both appearance and character. The secret book of John. These secret books. Okay, gotta be careful. There are some good ones and there's some strange ones. Pray about it. Now I can tell you this: certain books, Jesus quoted them, like the Book of Enoch. See, Peter quoted the Book of Enoch. Jesus, or I was saying Jesus, but it's really, remember, his true name is Yahusha. I've done videos on that. I tend to, if I think I'm talking to an audience that doesn't understand that, I tend to say the name Jesus, but that's not his real name. He's a Hebrew. His name is Yahusha. Some people say Yeshua, but Yeshua is more of just an abbreviated form of Yahusha. And I think it's limited in a number of times it's written and abbreviated. So, no, his name is Yahusha. Essentially, if you wrote it all out, it'd be Yahuwah, Yahweh-Shah. Yahweh saves. Okay, we're going to get to that because that is very important that you know that. Because the Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou on my right hand. The Lord and the Lord. Interesting. And that ain't the only place that you get that term together like that. The Lord and the Lord. Or the Lord said unto the Lord. Or the Lord called down fire from the Lord. See, that English translation is screwing everybody up. Not just the English, the Greek one too. You got to get back to the original Hebrew. It's a book written by Hebrews to Hebrews, for Hebrews. And if you're a Gentile and you want to come along, we'll get right. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, the secret book of John adds that he had the body of a snake and the head of a lion, with eyes like lightning bolts. In ancient Greek philosophy, the lion was frequently a symbol of irrational passions. So they're saying Yahweh was irrational and passionately irrational. He was like Zeus. That's what they're saying. All these guys, they're all mushing all these Elohim together and confusing things. The Gnostics were steeped in, I told you. The Gnostics were steeped in the Greek philosophical tradition. So the description of the demiurge as having a lion's head was probably intended to show that he was a being who couldn't or wouldn't control his base urges. That certainly fits the demiurge's personality as described in their texts. It's getting crazy, you guys. Let's keep it rolling. Okay, when Sophia saw the horrifying, twisted being that had come from her, she was deeply ashamed and afraid. She disowned him and cast him out of heaven. It sounds like Satan being cast out of heaven. But also, it sounds like one of those women who got knocked up by one of the watchers when she gave birth, and she said, "Oh my goodness, what are these things? What is this horrid creature I just gave birth to?" You know, I can imagine, because these Nephilim weren't necessarily attractive. You know, I don't know. I wasn't there. But they weren't human. We know that. So from his lonely position where his madness and conceit could go unchecked, the demiurge gave birth to the archons. Archons. I could swear I heard that in Star Trek, a Star Trek episode. The archons. I don't know. Anyways. Beings who were like him and could help him administer the material world. He then created the material world, which, like all creations, was a reflection of the personality of its creator. So, okay, they're saying the demiurge is psycho, and the material world was created in his image or personality. So material world is psycho. I get it. That's what the Gnostics believe. Okay, that's interesting. Let's continue. The demiurge then created. Wait a minute. Now we're getting to Adam and Eve after all of this. The demiurge created Adam and Eve and imprisoned divine sparks from heaven within them. He told them that he was the only God and issued the 10 Commandments, even though he himself broke each and every one of those commandments. That does not compute. Make it make sense. For example, he lied when he claimed to be the only God and that Adam and Eve would die if they ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge and of good and evil, which they did die. Oh, but God said in the day that they eat, that they would die. Well, what does Peter say? Look, Enoch says it, that 1,000 years is but a day, and a day, 1,000 years. There's a year for a day principle, or what do they call it? A year for a day principle, and then there's the 1,000-year day principle. If you notice, Adam was well on his way to being 1,000 years old, but he was cut just short of 1,000 years old. So within that day, he died, that 1,000-year period. Because as you can see, the creation is a 7,000-year process. And the seventh day is called the millennial reign of the Messiah. Hopefully you're picking up what I'm putting down here. Okay, anyway. For example, so they call him the demiurge Yahweh, and that he lied and he da-da-da-da-da. Tree of knowledge. Oh, here it is. Adam and Eve would die if they ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He insulted his mother and father by refusing to acknowledge their existence. He made a graven image of the divine when he modeled the material world on his corrupt and ignorant misunderstandings of heaven. And he committed adultery by attempting to rape Eve. Now, this is sounding a little bit more like Mr. Zeus. You see, they were heavily influenced by the Greeks. So, I don't know. When you say Christian, what are you actually saying? What do you mean by that? People have asked me, are you Christian? And I pretty much say I'm a follower of Yahushua HaMashiach, the son of Yah. So if you're Christian and you hear that, what does it mean to you? You see what I'm saying? If you don't understand things, what I'm not going to do is say, yeah, I remember we used to have to say that in church. I mean, you literally had to learn the creed. You know, I believe in the blankety blank church, in the holy this and the, and you have to recite it during the anyway. That's not what I do, and I suggest that not be what you do. But to each his own. Let's continue. He committed adultery by attempting. What the heck is he talking about? Anyway, let's go. Hey, try the grapey Eve. Genesis 19. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah. Brimstone and fire from the Lord came out of heaven. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah and brimstone and fire from the Lord. So the Lord rained down fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord. See, this is a little interesting little things here. Okay, are we at the... Well, here's the Judaism. I'm going to tell you, this is their foundation, and it's a strong foundation. Deuteronomy 6, verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. So we break it down in Hebrew as Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. So this is saying our God is one. And so that's it. That's the basic premise of how in Judaism they would combat Gnosticism, Zoroastrians, Christians. You see what I'm saying? They're saying you guys are coming up with these multiple gods. But it says here, our Lord is one Lord. Well, what's the actual trend? Yahweh, Elohim, the Lord our God. Well, if we just actually translate it, the eternal, our mighty ones. Kind of what it's saying. Sometimes you got to break it all the way down, right? So there's something still lacking in all of this. I mean, there's an answer, and once you know the answer, everything just works. Everything. So basically, the rabbis had to combat all these new systems of beliefs that are similar. You know, Christianity in its early sense. Remember, the first Christians, and they didn't consider themselves Christians. I mean, if you understand the history of Christianity, you'll know that Christians existed like 1,000 years before Jesus. I bet you didn't know that. You see, there's an offshoot of Zoroastrianism, which is the story of Mithras, the Anointed. And how would you say Mithras, the Anointed? Mithras, the Christos, the Christ. There were Christians long before Paul gave his little oratory. They were first called Christians at Antioch. Well, why did they call them Christians? Because Paul was talking about the man God. So they assumed, oh, these are Christians. They already knew about Christians, except Christians in their minds worship the man God Mithras. So he's listening to this Hebrew talk about the man God, and he goes, oh, they're Christians. You get it? It wasn't some new title. They just thought these guys, Paul was part of that Mithras group called Christians. That's the part people don't get because they don't know history. And because you don't know history, you can't. They say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Oh, yeah. There's going to be a lot of rhyming in the last days. A lot of stuff that could have been avoided if you just were a decent student of history. But I don't know. I bet you can, it's funny. I bet you can name LeBron James's stat lines for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But you couldn't tell me, I don't know. You couldn't tell me what Gambia is or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's really important? Bread and circuses? Or, hey, what's going on in this world? Because people don't think about it until it hits them over the head. And usually by the time it hits you over the head, it's too late. So maybe we should just get our heads out of our you-know-whats and start paying attention to what's going on in this world. Because there's a lot going on. And you, my friend, have not had a voice in any of the decisions that are going to affect you and your children. You're busy spouting, what do they call it? You're busy spouting the programmed, I don't know. We live in a free country. No, you don't. You got to pay taxes. Ain't nothing free about that. Right? We're a democracy. No, you're not. You never have been, and they didn't found this government to be a democracy. It's a constitutional republic. Thomas Jefferson said democracy is the absolute worst form of government where 51% of the people can take away the rights of 49% of the people. What that would mean is if the 51% win, because they have the majority, they could turn around and look at the 49% and pass a law, because they have the majority, saying we're going to execute everyone who doesn't agree with us. And then half your population is dead the next morning. You see what I'm saying? Democracy will always deteriorate into some form of dictatorship or even a monarchy if it gets bad enough, right? I'm just saying, we are a constitutional republic, and that the idea behind a republic is that we have God-given rights. And they list them in the Bill of Rights saying, hey, we don't care we don't care if the whole country is 320 million to 1 to vote that freedom of speech should go away. You can't do it because it's in the Bill of Rights. It's a God-given right. And so that's what a republic does. It establishes up front what your God-given rights are, and they shall not be infringed upon. So if they're being infringed upon, what does that tell you? So they asked Benjamin Franklin when he came out of that Constitutional Convention, hey, Ben, what kind of government did you give us? He said, a republic, if you can keep it. Yeah. Anyways, I'm going off on this tangent again. Let's get back on track. Here. So this is the premise of the rabbinical Judaism. It's solid, okay? The Lord, our God, is one Lord. Okay. So what is Elohim? What is Elohim? Let's see what else we can unearth here. Like I say, it's all very simple when you have the key. There's a simple key. But in order to have the key, you will have to be willing to change. I mean, all the stuff that's been pumped into your brain all your life, you're going to have to take a moment and say, okay, let me start from zero. Let's weigh this thing out. And then you can come to a more reasonable decision based on your current level of maturity. John chapter 1 and verse 1, in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning, the Word was there in the beginning. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him. All things were made by him. The Word. And later on, they say all things were made by and for Jesus Christ, Yahushua HaMashiach. So, all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And then later on it says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, right? And I wonder who that could be. But it also says he created all things. So what does that make him? Oh, man. Let's continue. This gets deep. I think we're approaching towards the end now. This was a marathon. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, we have come to the end. Let's hit it. Well, not the very end. Daniel chapter 7. And I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Well, I think that's about it for today, my friends. I love you all so much, and thank you for continually supporting my content. If you did enjoy this video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and share this with your friends and family. I'm sure they'd find it interesting as well. And may everybody have a beautiful and blessed day who's in the body of Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ of Nazareth. And I'll see you all on the next video. Shalom.